Hello everyone, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney. I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode I'm going to be discussing the somewhat thorny subject of online versus in-person triathlon coaching. So, for a lot of people, when they think of a coach, or when some of you may think of me, they imagine somebody sat at the side of a running track with a clipboard who's barking splits at people, come on, let's go faster, the whistle, and a stopwatch. Or maybe in the case of triathlon, we tend to think more about somebody who is on the side of a pool. They might be barking out splits to people, at the end of their hundreds, to let them know how they're doing, pushing them really hard. And I wanted to have a look at, the sort of the pros and cons of that classic in-person coaching as opposed to a remote relationship. Now, to make it clear before I wade into this, I have done thousands of hours of both. I won the British Triathlon Volunteer of the Year award for the London region for my work with my local triathlon club, where I spent 2 hours every single week for several years, every Monday evening on poolside coaching swimmers. I've done my time working as a swimming teacher. I have delivered, I'm starting to lose track now. I've done a lot of in-person coaching over the years. When I first started out as well, most of what I did was in person working with people. But equally, as time has gone by, I have shifted more towards that kind of online remote coaching relationship, and I have written hundreds of bespoke training plans for people, as well as plenty of training plans which I've written for general sale. And a big take-home message for you is that neither one is better nor inferior to the other. There is absolutely places for both within a triathlete's training. Anyway, let's jump in and have a look at in-person coaching to start with. Now, for the beginner triathlete, there really is no replacement for going to a pool and attending a swim session with either a one-to-one coach in an ideal world or part of a group session. Now, this is because having somebody there to be able to look at your stroke, to be able to give you real-time feedback, to be able to provide demonstrations to you is pretty invaluable. They can walk around, they can see your stroke from different angles. The time that I've spent coaching people face-to-face in pools, is where I have seen some of the biggest steps forward with triathletes, and especially their swimming, their comfort in the water, their efficiency, all of this, because swimming is so difficult, it's so intimidating, it's so technical. There is a lot to be said for having somebody, coaching you face to face. However, at the same time, it is slightly overrated. The reason is that you tend to get a lot of very accomplished swimming coaches. Sometimes, triathlon swimming coaches. Other times, people who come more from a swimming background. Incredibly experienced people, and people will attend their same session week in, week out, because they've heard that they managed to achieve this, or they've been doing it for 30 years. And they turn up and there's a session on the whiteboard for them to follow, and the coach writes the session on the whiteboard and then sits down and might end up fiddling on their phone or just focusing on the faster athletes or their friends without actually really engaging with the swimmers, especially those who are struggling. Now, this is really a dark art. When I used to coach group swim sessions, I tried to make a point of giving at least one piece of feedback or encouragement, having one engagement with each swimmer. And the capacity of this session was 16 swimmers. So we had the pool for an hour. By the time that everybody's got changed and got in and you've explained the set, people are swimming for 50-55 minutes. So you don't actually have an enormous amount of time to focus on those people. Now, if I had an assistant coach with me, then we might split and go, okay, well, I'll do lane 1 and 2, you do lane 3 and 4. That gives us a bit more time. However, it really is still limited. If you were we had a minimum standard of somebody be able to swim 100 meters without stopping, because we were there to coach existing swimmers. We couldn't sit there and spend 20 minutes a session with someone who's just come along who can barely swim in the water, really coax them along. Now, we have the skills to, but we just didn't have the time in that group coaching setting. And if you want to hire a one-to-one swimming coach, that is possible. However, you're not only paying for the coach's time, but you're also paying for the rental of the lane, because the coach will have to rent a lane to be able to coach you at a pool, which you're probably going to be looking at about £25, £30, maybe more for the hour, on top of what the coach wants to take home, which in this day and age is probably going to be sort of 50, 60 quid. So you might end up looking at the best part of £100 for a sort of a fully sort of one-to-one coach swim session. If you're looking to get video analysis, this could be even more if you're looking for them to put a video together. Now, this can be money really, really well spent. I'm not telling people don't get one-to-one swim sessions. You really should. They are much more applicable to somebody, and I'd much rather that somebody pays £100 to a coach to get a full sort of breakdown of their stroke, maybe with video analysis to give them some real take-home points. Then they spend that same money for 10 weeks, £10 a session for 10 weeks attending a sort of a club swim or a group swim session and not really get much in the way of feedback from the coach. So I'm not saying don't do it. What I am saying is it's not especially economical. If somebody is going back to have that one-to-one session every 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, however regularly they want to go back and they want to get some feedback, that's really quite expensive. And when you consider that I can provide somebody with 3 months of coaching for £180 rather than an hour of coaching for about £100, you can start to see how sort of quite resource intensive it comes to have those regular one-to-one coach sessions. Now, I absolutely recommend that everybody about once a year goes to have their stroke looked at by a swim coach. Just because your stroke was great a couple of years ago doesn't mean that it's still doing what it's supposed to be doing. It could be that, as we all get older, we all sort of stiffen up and tighten up to an extent, and that we don't have the same mobility in our shoulders that we used to. That's affecting our recovery. There's all sorts of things that can happen. If you do a big run training block, that can affect your calf flexibility, which impacts your ankle mobility, the ability for you to point your feet to walk behind you, and to be able to get that nice, efficient, streamlined position. As an athlete, you are a ever evolving being, and again, same with bike fits. You need to get these refreshed at regular intervals. But again, not especially economical to do it super regularly, especially if you get to a point where you feel that you're seeing sort of diminishing returns. If I do sort of 3 or 4 one-to-one coach swim sessions with people, which I've done in the past, by the end of the 4th session, I'd like to think that if I'm doing a good job as a coach, it is time to sort of let them go and go, right, okay, now I need you to go out and I need you to practice what it is that we've done. And you maybe sort of come back to, I'm always here if you want to come back to me. But we should have, hopefully by that point, we should have got your breathing sorted out. We should have got you rotating nicely in the water. We should have sorted out your catch and your kick. I tend to, when I'm working with athletes on a one-to-one basis in person, I tend to give them 2, maybe 3 coaching points each session, because if you just give them 1, then they're not really getting value for money there. If you give them much more than 3, then it becomes a bit much. You're asking them to focus on so many things at once that it just becomes a bit sort of overwhelming. And I send them, a written sort of feedback afterwards. Here's what we saw, and here is what I want you to work on. Group sessions, on the other hand, I think it's great, honestly, if athletes can attend group training sessions. I think it really does give it a sense of camaraderie. It really does help if you are pushing through a tough swim set and you've got a few other people in your lane and you're taking turns at the front, and you're sharing a little bit of chat and banter, before the session, in the rest periods, afterwards. It really does help people push through. And I recommend that if people are on the fence about these things, they absolutely try it. The issue is that these sessions tend to either be sort of very early in the morning, because that's when they can get the pool time. This sort of most swimming pools, their primary revenue stream comes from swimming lessons to children, and they want to keep the lanes free for these sessions. So from 9 a.m. onwards, maybe even 8 a.m. in some cases, the pool is going to be absolutely full of children who are learning to swim. and chances are there'll be some really long-standing swimming club that will have the 7 a.m. slot. And if I were to go down to the local leisure centre and say, "Oh hi, can I rent a lane for an hour every Friday morning indefinitely?" They're not going to say, "Oh yes, sir, we've got one right here. I'm going to be added to a very long waiting list." So it really is, it's difficult to make sure that your availability lines up with the right kind of coach delivering the right kind of session for you. Now, some coaches, they've been doing this for sort of 10, 15 years. There's a swimming coach near me who's very successful. And he has at least one squad session every day in pools in the area because he's been doing it so long. He's played the long game. He's built up these relationships with the pool owners and he's now got his squad swimming there, which is great. And from what I know, he's a very good coach too. So I absolutely recommend that you join these if you can. But it can be very difficult to make these align, especially many of them actually tend to be in the evening, starting at 8, maybe even 9 p.m. in some cases, which can be very disruptive if you're the kind of person who likes training in the morning, and you have a morning session the next day. Then staying that late swimming may not do you the world of good. If you are new to open water swimming, I thoroughly recommend that you get an in-person coach for your first session if you can afford it. Especially if you're nervous, because that is going to help you so much. I couldn't afford to do so when I first started open water swimming, and it took me a long time to get confident, to build up my confidence. Relative to people who I have coached one-to-one in the water, and you can just see they have that bit more confidence when there's someone there with them who they know can help support them. On the very rare occasion that somebody has a real freak out, I can be there, they can sort of hold on to me, I can support them, I get them to float on their back, I support them at their shoulders and the small of their back, and I can then make sure that they are safe. Now, this is something that is really invaluable, and I recommend that people do it. If you can't stretch to having that one-to-one, most lakes will have group coach sessions where you can turn along every sort of Saturday or Sunday in the open water season, and you can learn to swim with a group, okay? And the coach will show you how to put your wetsuit on, how to sight, how to enter the water, basic safety, all this, and take you through this, which again, I highly recommend attending if you can. I ran several of those sessions for a couple of years at London Royal Docks over in East London. And yeah, I help hundreds of swimmers sort of overcome their fear and, really work in that group environment. Again, if you are paralysed with fear, I do recommend you get a one-to-one coach if at all possible. Now, this is all support that just cannot be provided by an online coach. No matter how good they are, there is no way that an online coach can replicate that feeling of having somebody on poolside with you, really helping you sort of calm you, give sort of a 360-degree analysis of your stroke, be able to provide demonstrations. It's a lot quicker. Now, I provide an online swim coaching analysis where somebody can send me in a video of their swim stroke. I know it can be difficult to get a video of you swimming, but a lot of people seem to manage it somehow. Get a video of your swim technique, send it over to me, and I'll send it back with some analysis on, you might want to think about this, your head position, how your arm comes in, your feet. And that can be really quite beneficial because I can go and I can list sort of 10 things in a Word document or a video that I can send to someone that they can keep referring to back over time, and it's a lot cheaper to do that because somebody's only paying for my time. They're not paying for having that pool time that comes with it and sort of having to factor in, because if a coach attends a one-to-one session, chances are there's going to be 20-30 minute travel time either side of that hour, so you actually end up paying for sort of roughly 2 hours of that coach's time. They have to factor these things in with the pricing, so it's a lot more economical to do it online, but there really is no replace for having somebody with you, alongside you in the water or on a kayak in the open water when you're just getting started, or they're on poolside helping you with your stroke. Now, when it comes to cycle coaching and run coaching, it's a lot more limited in the value of what a in-person coach can offer. Now, I have had it with clients of mine who are nervous cyclists. Okay, and I will do in-person sessions with them, and you will teach them to brake by you set up, 2 lines of cones, and you go, right, I want you to stop within that box. This is an example of a session I might run. You got to cycle, and then when you pass that first cone, start braking and stop by the time you get to the second line of cones. And you slowly decrease that window, and you improve their confidence with their ability to be able to stop quite quickly. And there's all of this, teaching them cornering, mounting, dismounting, how to use their gears. There are all of these that can be done, but it's not nearly as crucial for a triathlete as in-person swim coaching, because these are techniques that, broadly speaking, you can probably learn from one of my courses or by watching a YouTube video, to be able to understand, oh right, okay, that's how I clip in and out. Oh, that's how to take a corner. Again, it accelerates your development if you have a coach there with you. But if you're paying for somebody's time to be able to do that, is it really, does that sort of pay off? Does the investment in paying a coach to be there and to watch you brake, corner, clipping, clip out, sprint, all of that, does that really have much of a bearing on your performance? Is that a worthwhile financial investment when you consider what else you could do with that money? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's for the client to decide. And with running, I personally, I don't give an awful lot of technical feedback when I'm giving somebody some in-person run coaching. I may look at their form, and if I see they're really slouching, I may say, right, okay, let's look at some core strength. If I can see that their knees are bowing in with every step, okay, we need to do some strength work around the hips to prevent that. I will look at somebody's form, and I may give them basic cues, such as, okay, let's stand tall, look forward. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to say, oh yeah, you're heel striking there. Yeah, we really need to get you midfoot striking. Because as soon as you start messing around with how somebody runs, the chances of injury absolutely skyrocket. And I've had, I remember a client that I started working with, this is back in COVID now. He said that he was coming back from injury. Okay, my due diligence as a coach, I have to sometimes pick my right moment, but I'll ask them, what is it that caused the injury, so I know what it is so we can avoid that in future. And he said, oh, well, I hired sort of this coach that got matched with me via a matching service, and he asked me to send in a video of me running, so I did. And he asked me to change my run gait. And that's what caused the issue, because he wanted me running midfoot. And I think that, in my humble opinion, a lot of coaches who focus on things such as sort of midfoot, forefoot, heel strike, landing, they're doing it to give a element of authority. He didn't pay an awful lot for the coach. He was on the lowest pricing tier of that coach package. And I feel that because it's something that's really easy to spot and really easy to diagnose, and people like the idea of, oh yes, well, midfoot is more efficient. We're going to get them to run like this, rather than it actually being in the best interest of the athlete. Now, there could be plenty of people who do lots of running, and they will be midfoot all the way, and that's absolutely fine. Also, a lot of people do lots of running who are heel strikers, like myself, and broadly fine, don't have much in the way of injuries. A forefoot is a little bit unusual. It's not something I point those in the direction of, but I know that some people who come from maybe more of a track and field background, some who are sort of running from a very young age, they might naturally have a forefoot strike. I think that Alistair Brownlee, I want to say off the top of my head, at least at one point in his career was a forefoot striker. It is something that is very easy to go, oh yes, you should change that, it's better. But there really isn't a huge amount of evidence to suggest that the injury rate is significantly higher for heel strikers relative to midfoot strikers. Of course, heel striking does increase your risk of certain injuries, but midfoot striking will increase your risk of other injuries as well. It really is a very grey area, and as soon as you start fiddling around with those kinds of things, that is how it can really start to affect somebody's sort of rate of injury. And the body is very good at finding its most efficient way to run. If you look at the top Ironman athletes out there and you look at how they run, you'll see there is no absolute, gold standard way to run, especially over longer distances. Over a sprint, you can look at somebody's running and see that they've got a nice triple extension, they're all driving their arms, they're all locked in. They are absolutely nailed into the efficient position, because over 100 meters you can afford to hold that position. If we are running a marathon off of the bike, we are not going to be able to hold the textbook running position. Our bodies are all going to be sort of built quite differently, and we just have, over time, our body will slowly find the most efficient way for it to move. And that may not look overly pretty, but look at Lionel Sanders. If you find a video of his run form, it's definitely a bit left field, some people would call it. But he's a pretty tall athlete, I believe, off the top of my head. Or no, I might be getting mixed up with Sam Long. But his biomechanics, his body has just found a way for him to be able to run a lot faster than you or I would probably be able to run. And sure, some people can look at it and go, "Oh, that's ugly." He's giving away performance there, and maybe he is, but for me it's much more important that somebody runs injury free and somebody runs just generally efficiently than getting caught up in the minutiae of somebody's running gait. Now when it comes to choice of shoes, this does become important, because if we can see that somebody has excessive amounts of pronation, that is something that we need to address with the choice of shoes. A little bit of pronation is natural, that is how people walk. But if you have an excessive amount of overpronation or oversupination, then your choice of shoe really does need to reflect that. But broadly speaking, the more that you mess around with somebody's natural running gait, the more inclined you are to give them an injury. And then when it comes to having a coach who is going to be on track side or there during sort of an interval session, who is giving out the splits, again, it's a nice to have. But they'll give you a little bit of encouragement. But realistically, they're not delivering anything that couldn't be delivered via a training plan remotely. Yes, it's nice to have that in person. It's nice to have that reassurance. It's nice to have someone there. It could be that if you are uncomfortable running at night, that going and driving to go to a coach session where you're feeling a safer space, hey, you know what? That's maybe a very good reason to go to these sessions. But broadly speaking, most of what running coaches provide, on the whole, could probably be delivered remotely. And finally, of course, we have strength and conditioning coaching. Now, this is something that, again, I recommend that people, if they are really sort of worried about strength training, they don't understand the exercises, they want to learn how to deadlift, how to squat, how to lift these weights safely, that getting a session booked in with a strength and conditioning coach is a really good way to go about that. I would recommend, again, it's just hiring your local personal trainer, maybe a friend from school who's starting to do personal training. A lot of these don't really have any understanding of sort of performance for sport. Now, the difference between a personal trainer and a strength and conditioning coach, I know this because I'm both, and well, you need to be a personal trainer to become a strength and conditioning coach, but a personal trainer is much more focused on general health outcomes, about losing weight, about gaining muscle, all of just this general sort of gym fitness, maybe a little bit of running in there, but they are just there for that general sort of calorie burn, cardiovascular benefit and sort of strength training side of things. Whereas a strength and conditioning coach is somebody who helps their clients to get faster in sport through strength training, which is really quite different. So if you can, try and find a strength and conditioning coach. If you maybe put in strength and conditioning gym near me into Google, might come up with some options, see if they have someone who can help you one-on-one, and try to make sure it's someone who's worked with triathletes before. We are a slightly left field group, let's be honest. And because we have all these sports to consider, I mean, if you go to somebody who is simply a strength and conditioning coach that helps people with their running, they may well be used to helping rugby players and football players developing their sprint, which won't necessarily be especially relevant to somebody who's training for an Ironman. So if possible, try to find someone who's experienced with triathletes and is a strength and conditioning coach. But again, if you just want help, if you just want to get one session where somebody's going to help you with the sort of the basic strength movements, then having just sort of getting a personal trainer for an hour could be a way to go about this. But if you want somebody to help you, really with the bigger picture stuff and with injury reduction, then strength and conditioning coach is the way to go. So before we really get stuck into the online triathlon coaching, I wanted to share broadly how it works, because for a lot of people, they're going to be really confused as to sort of, well, how does that work then? Well, essentially, I'll have a chat with an athlete who will sort of show interest in me, and we'll chat through, their equipment that they have, their goals, the time they have available, likes, dislikes, injury history, anything sort of related to their triathlon performance. Could also include sort of their work, family life, whatever information they want to share with me to help me write them the best plan possible. And I'll go away and I will then sort of be in communication with them, and I'll write them a plan that is bespoke, that is built around them. It's not a case of them trying to change something to fit around them. It is built completely around them. And this can be especially helpful for people who work shifts, who work unusual hours. It can also be very helpful for anyone who is, for instance, a very strong swimmer, but is completely new to running. Because if you look at any sort of triathlon training plan, it's going to be written assuming that you are equally good or bad at all three sports. And if you're coming into the sport with, you may be a really experienced sort of lifter, for instance, you have a background in CrossFit, and also know running, but have absolutely no clue what you're doing with cycling. So you want somebody who can help you sort of piece that together, put all the pieces together to work out the best way forward. But I'll then go and I'll write somebody a training plan, which normally I give them the chance to give a look over and say, actually that won't work, or can we change this? But broadly speaking, they go off, they'll do that training plan, and I trust them to be able to make the right choices when it comes to sort of editing the session, the week, moving things around, cutting things short, swapping sessions based on sort of how they feel. Because as I mentioned, good coaching is about trust. And then depending on sort of the package of mind that they're on is when we'll then have a feedback where I'll sort of have a look through the data and give them some feedback. They can ask me some questions. They can tell me what considerations need to be made with their next sort of week or month of coaching. And this sort of runs on repeat. And the sessions that I write are uploaded to a piece of software that's called Training Peaks. This is sort of the market leader in triathlon sort of scheduling and analysis software. It really is. Strava is nice and social, but it's rubbish if you're a coach and actually trying to prescribe workouts. There are other options out there, but Training Peaks really is the market leader and has been for some time. And when I take an athlete on, I'll first start to understand how it is that they want to execute these sessions, what metrics they want to use. Do you have a power meter? Do you have a turbo trainer, heart rate monitor? Are we running to pace or into heart rate? What is it? How is it that you want me to schedule the training? And I'll write sessions based on that. So it may be that we have a run session to heart rate that's on the weekend, and we're going to swim to RPE, and then we'll do a cycle session to power for an indoor session, and I sort of set them we work out what metrics it is that we're using, and we then do tests. So it could be a threshold test for heart rate, or for power, or for swimming, which will then give us our numbers. So, looking at myself as an example, I could say, well, my CSS is 150 per 100 meters in swimming, my FTP is about 260 watts, and my threshold run pace is about sort of 4 minutes per kilometre. And I will then take all that information, put it into Training Peaks. And then Training Peaks, when I'm writing the plan, I'm dragging and dropping workouts onto the calendar. Training Peaks will populate each of those workouts with individual targets for that athlete. So it will go, okay, so if your FTP is 260 watts, here is where we want you to be during this session. And more than that, if you have a cycle computer or some software that you're using that links up to Training Peaks, which the vast majority of people do, you can import that workout there. So I could be riding on Zwift and I could have my power targets in a workout for me to follow. I could head out on a ride with my Wahoo head unit, and that could then have my power targets for me. Or I could be running, and that could give me running splits as I'm running. And you can set this up, should you wish, so that it sets off an alarm when you go above or below the target. Now, some people have this enabled. I think especially for interval sessions, it's helpful. If I am really working hard, then I don't want to have to keep glancing down at my watch to see if I'm staying on power, okay, my targets, or pace targets. I want to have my watch to tell me, oh, you're slowing, pick it up. Or to be able to say, you've gone out a bit hot, back it off. Even as my tension starts to drift, or just as I'm doing a longer session and it may be that I start to slow as I sort of lose concentration. You can set these alarms up to help you. Alternatively, you can just run it yourself to feel. I mean, let's be honest. I can't think there are many people who, if we're going out for a 4 or 5 hour ride, really want our head unit to be telling us off with an alarm whenever we drop below the power target, because we could just be coasting downhill. And when it comes to even to Zwift, what I recommend is, look, if you're doing a session of like 2 hours in zone 2, just remember what the top of your zone 2 is and try to stay under that number. You don't need to really overcomplicate it. Set people this training, they'll go out and they will complete this training for sort of however long it is based on sort of the amount that they're paying me. Could be a week, could be a month, could be 3 months. They go out and they'll complete this training, and I can then look at that and decide, okay, do we need to retest this? We haven't done an FTP test for the last 3 months, and your heart rate's looking pretty low relative to the power numbers. I think we've probably got fitter. Let's do another retest. And you follow this this pattern. You pan out a whole year. So you go, okay, where's our base phase going to be? When's our build phase going to be? How are we going to peak? What's the TSS going to look like? What are the weekly hours? And you're collating all of this information. And I mean, myself personally, I'll also write everybody's strength and conditioning sessions. That session changes every single week in at least some way or another. It could be we're swapping exercises, the exercise is going to be longer, they're going to be shorter. Nutrition, I don't tend to give people exact targets each day. I do think that is a bit micromanagey. But, I am going to share with people principles. We're going to create nutrition plans for race day. We are going to work out the carbs now we're going to create race plans. We're going to come up with targets. This is, and I'm also going to work with them to sort of help with, sort of improve their sleep perhaps if they want to. If they have a monthly cycle, then we might help build the plan around that. This really is a plan that is built around you as an individual, as an athlete. And that, I guess, sort of in a nutshell, is what I would explain sort of online triathlon coaching as being. It's the scheduling, and I do video analysis as well. If somebody sends me a video of them sort of training or they want some feedback on, I can provide that as well, depending on the plan that they're on. And yeah, triathlon coaching via sort of a remote basis, it really is leaving no stone unturned with somebody's performance rather than focusing on a single element such as sort of their swim stroke or how it is that they perform in a single sport. Now, if somebody hires me on a one-to-one basis for an hour or they attend a group session that I'm running, they have my full attention for that hour and I'll do everything in my power to make them a faster athlete. But what about the other 167 hours of the week where I'm not there with them? Well, they're left on their own really, aren't they? And that is where the beauty of online triathlon coaching comes in. Because rather than somebody paying me, good money to be with them on a one-to-one basis for an hour, they have my support for an entire month. And we're not just looking at one session. It's not a case of write a session on the whiteboard, sit down, watch somebody do it, go home. That's something that can be done remotely. I can set somebody swimming sessions, running sessions, cycling sessions, strength sessions that the athlete goes out and completes in their own time. Now, obviously, I can't be there watching them to give them feedback while they're doing these. But what can I do? Well, I can look at the data they upload. If I've given somebody a cycling workout and they upload the data file, I can see their heart rate, I can see their cadence, I can see their power data, I can see what the temperature was, I can see the elevation, and I can go and I can look at this data, and that can give me a real insight into the athlete's performance that I just wouldn't be able to get even if I was cycling alongside them. I could see how their heart rate climbs relative to their power output over the duration of a session. If we are looking at swimming, I could have a look at somebody and see how they're slow and does their stroke rate slow. I can get an insight into how the session went. Now, I used to be a lot more into data than I am now. I used to really scour data looking for all of these tiny little details that could give me an insight. Whereas in recent years, especially since 2020, I've stepped back from that a little bit. And I think, it's far more important to ask somebody the right questions following a session. When somebody uploads a session, and I look at the data and I'll leave them a comment, which in most cases will be a question. So if I look at the data, I can see that they were well under the power target, or that they faded during the intervals, or that their heart rate was higher than expected. I'll ask them a question, and their response will probably tell me more than the data could. Because good coaching is about having that feedback loop. Because I could look at it and go, oh, your heart rate looks really high. Any idea why that is? And they could come back to me and they could say, yeah, you know what, I think I might be going down with something. Or they could say, oh, I've got a lot on at home or with work right now. There could be a real myriad of things that could cause their heart rate to be high that isn't the actual sort of intensity of the session. So if I just looked at the data on its own, I run the risk of reading into things and patterns that aren't there. But when I look at this data and combining that with an athlete's subjective feedback, that is incredibly powerful. And that is how you really make an athlete faster. At this point, it's worth pointing out that all of the fastest athletes, professional and non-professional in the world, I would wager that if somebody's qualifying for World Championship events, if somebody's racing as a professional, if somebody's right at the top of the sport, they have a coach. Because it's very difficult to be able to look at your own training objectively and make the right decisions on what's going to make you faster. Because we're all going to gravitate towards what we think we need to work on, what we most recently watched a video about or read about. As opposed to having somebody objectively look at all of our training and go, you're not doing enough of this. Or I think we should focus on this session that I know you don't really want to do lots of, but we do need to start introducing it. So many of these people, they work with coaches, and these are nearly all online triathlon coaching relationships. The reason for this is that having one in-person coaching session, it can be incredibly impactful, especially if you are a newer swimmer who needs help with their technique. However, what's much more impactful is if we can write, for that same money, we can write somebody a sort of an entire month of training that they can then go out and they can nail all of these sessions being written bespoke for them. It really is that simple. My basic online triathlon coaching package, £60 a month. A session, a sort of a one-to-one swim session, as we've already touched on, going to be closer to about £100 these days. It is so much more economical and you can have so much more influence over somebody's performance. That one-to-one session is good. It does make you feel good to have that that face-to-face time, that one-to-one session with a coach. However, if you could, for that same money, if you could have a plan written completely around you for a month, if you could have someone there to help you with not only your swim, cycle and run sessions, but also your strength training, your nutrition, your sort of supporting habits, everything that influences performance, that is where performance comes from, especially over the longer distances. Every top athlete who is working with a coach, it will be primarily done via a remote basis. Now, this isn't to say that they won't see their coach occasionally. I mean, I listened to a triathlon podcast where professional triathletes host it, and they discussed that sort of once, maybe twice a year, they might spend a week with their coach who will sort of see them with their training, doing some of their sessions. But if somebody is heading out for a 4-5 hour long ride, their coach isn't coming with them. They might do a handful of sessions with them. They might be there on poolside watching them swim. They might maybe do a track workout, maybe some skill sessions with them. But even if you are in the same area as your coach cannot be there by your side for every single session. If you look at a professional triathlete and they train for sort of 20, 25, maybe 30 hours a week, if a coach was there for every session, that's pretty much a full-time job. Just being there in that space with that athlete. By the time you take into account all the other time that would be spent on other areas, that would be their full-time job watching a professional triathlete train. So you're going to need to pay that coach a lot of money, probably a 6-figure salary, to have a highly qualified triathlon coach support your training without any remote aspect. It just isn't feasible to rely simply on face-to-face coaching. Now, when I lived in London, I lived in a relatively affluent area of southwest London, and I had a lot of people who would hire me because they wanted someone local. And they were, oh yes, it'd be good, we can do that, and we can sort of include these sessions. Okay, great. And then I started working with them. I started writing the training plans. I started leaving them comments after their workouts. I, really put my heart and soul into my coaching relationships, as I always do. And when it came round to it, they realised, actually, you know what? With the relationship that we currently have, I don't even need to see you face to face. Not that it's a case of I don't want to see you, but they already felt that they're getting all that they needed from an online coaching relationship. There were people who sort of lived about sort of 500 metres from me. I knew they lived in the same area as me, and I talked to them every day, but I never saw them face to face because they got everything they needed from that remote relationship. Now, as a coach, I really try to avoid coming across as that kind of salesy, pushy. So when are we going to have these one-to-one sessions then? Because that doesn't build trust, and coaching relies on trust. But, I would sort of maybe make passing references to sort of these that they discussed that might be a good idea to have. But at the end of the day, with that daily communication, with that analysis of the data, with all of the resources and information I was able to provide them with the phone calls, they didn't feel the need to pay me sort of £50 an hour to stand by the poolside and watch them swim, or to do a run session with them, because they felt fully supported, educated, and informed from the remote coaching, even though they lived that close to me. Now, this really opens up a world of possibilities. If you live somewhere like London, then you will have a variety of coaches that live close to you. And if you were a woman who was looking for a coach who specialised in helping athletes train through the menopause, then chances are that there would be somebody in London who would be able to help you. I mean, it may be that they were a good sort of tube or train ride away, but if you live in a dense city that has a high population of triathletes, such as London, there would be someone nearby who could help you and you could do sessions with them. If you lived in the middle of nowhere and you wanted help with your triathlon training, but you wanted help with specifically somebody who specialised in helping women train through menopause, then your chances of finding someone who is able to do in-person sessions with you, who lives locally, who's going to be able to help you manage all this, they're really, really quite slim. In fact, depending on where you are, there might not be any triathlon coaches at all within 50 miles of you, let alone somebody who is going to be able to help you with the specific areas that you need. But when you start considering online triathlon coaching, then suddenly you have hundreds of coaches to choose from all over the world. You can work with your dream coach from wherever you are. If you are the kind of athlete who's looking to qualify for the World Championships and to place towards the top of their age group there, you can find a coach who has a proven track record. You can find a legendary coach who will be able to work on a very intimate one-to-one basis with you to help you become your best version of yourself. And sort of more importantly, I guess, than somebody's specialisations, although there are plenty of specialisations within triathlon coaching, is that online triathlon coaching, it allows you to work with somebody who you really feel that you gel with. Somebody who you feel that you have a connection with, somebody who you you trust, who you vibe with, who gets you. And that is really invaluable, because if you have a coaching relationship where there isn't that trust, if you're sort of chafing against each other a little bit, that's not healthy for either coach or athlete. And you know, it is difficult because if you are limiting yourself to those who are close to you, then your options are much more limited. As soon as you open yourself up to online triathlon coaching, then you can find, because there will be a coach out there, you can find a coach you really trust and you really vibe with, and you go, I trust this person to help make me sort of the best athletes, help them complete my event. I want their support because they work with athletes like me, because I like the way they talk. A lot of coaches have podcasts like this one, or YouTube videos, or articles that will help give you an insight into who it is that they are as a person. Some coaches go so far as to specialise in a certain race, and it's just these possibilities, this world of possibilities opens up if you look beyond kind of that safety blanket of restricting yourself to with sort of face-to-face one-to-one sessions. And I've heard people say that, you know, online triathlon coaching, it's useless. And well, you know, I guess it depends on the kind of person that you are. There are some people for whom it'd be a non-starter. If somebody's really nervous, then again, it may be they really need somebody in person. It could be, I mean, if they have a lot of money behind them and they're nervous, they may actually want to pay somebody, you know, to coach them in person for 2, 3, 4 sessions a week. Fair enough, it's them, it's their money, they can do what they want with it. But having that plan that is written around you, to have someone there in your corner who is adjusting the plan as life gets in the way. You know, it's all well and good. I sell training plans. You can head to the Training Peaks web store and you can download my Ironman plan or my 70.3 plan or whatever. But as soon as you start to lose significant amount of time due to illness or injury or any of these other circumstances that, you know, that we can't predict, then it does become trickier to pick up where you left off to adhere to these plans. And the training plan really is the backbone. That is the thing that is going to have the largest influence on your performance on race day. Now, you could be the kind of person who doesn't want to train with a training plan. And I say, well, of course, you don't need a training plan, in the same way that you don't need to hire a solicitor to sell your house. It's probably going to actually save you money in the long run and be a lot easier and less time intensive for you if you hire somebody else to do all of that tricky legal and financial work. Or you don't, in the UK at least, you don't need to pay a lawyer to represent you in court. You can go and you represent yourself. Nothing's stopping you. But there's a reason that people reach out for help in these situations, is because it is so time intensive to work out and to learn everything required to nail this. Now, I'm not directly equating defending yourself in a criminal court with triathlon training, but if you look at, if you hire a barrister to represent you, then you are hiring somebody with all their experience. They obviously they know the law, they know how it is that the courtroom session works. They will help you avoid traps laid by the prosecution. They will help guide you through everything to help avoid you going to prison, assuming you're innocent, of course, which I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you are. But if you are sort of equating it to a triathlon coach, well, yes, you could learn all about swimming and cycling and running and nutrition and strength training and the psychology behind it all. You could spend hundreds on textbooks, and you could spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours consuming these to help you understand and write the best training plan for yourself that you can. But there's a reason that people hire coaches. It's to do all that legwork for you, to help build something around you. And it's the same about sort of engineers or mechanics. You're not paying them for that 1 hour that they helped you. You're paying for all of the years, all of the education that helped them provide that for you. If I write somebody a month of training, I'm condensing a decade of coaching qualifications, books read, experience, mistakes, you name it. All of that is being channeled into your training plan. And that is something you just cannot replicate yourself. Now imagine that some of you will be listening to this and be thinking, oh, you know what? I didn't actually realise that it worked like that. But when you think about it, having somebody to help you with all aspects of your performance that is there to help you optimize all of your week rather than just focusing on a single session, that's how you can build greatness, isn't it? And yes, because that consistency, that long-term picture is so important. What a triathlete can achieve over weeks, months, years will eclipse what could possibly be achieved via a handful of one-to-one sessions. Again, both of them have their place, but when it comes to long-term development, when it comes to actually wanting to achieve a good time in an event, then that long-term picture is really important. Yeah, some people will be looking and going, oh, that's great, I could hire Simon and he could make sure that I'm optimizing all of my training. He can talk me through the nutrition so I don't have to sit through another dreary webinar or book again trying to understand. He can answer my questions. He can make it sound really simple. Yes, that's what I'll do. There are also going to be some people who go, well, I don't want to surrender control of my training to somebody else. I don't want it to stop being fun. I don't want to simply live my life like a robot. Now, there's definitely an element of, any coach is going to make you do certain things that, given a choice, you don't really want to do. Because that's part of that kind of objective piece. It's only be able to look from the outside in and going, the thing that's stopping you from going faster is this, and we need to do it. However, that's, a really robotic approach would be the sign of a bad coach to me. Somebody who expects you to be able to follow everything that they say unquestioningly, and without any flexibility. That is not an especially interesting way to train. Now, it has to be said, effective triathlon training, it is a bit of a grind, especially Ironman training, because you're going to be doing lots of training sessions that are relatively steady state, that are relatively uninspiring when we look at the intensity of the session. Of course, you can use these sessions to go out and explore new areas on your bike or running. Swimming is a bit more difficult, but you can go head out. So, I'll map out a new route where I can see a bit of that I've never run around before. For this ride, I've got a 3-hour ride, so I'll ride 3 hours in that direction to a train station and head back. There's a lot you can do to keep the variety going. But people are worried about that sort of loss of autonomy, which, I get, but that is why the feedback loop is there in coaching. That's why the athlete is there to say, hey, you know what, I'd really like to do this group training session. And I'm the kind of coach that is going to go, you know what, I'd much rather that you go along to that group training session, you have that camaraderie, you have some fun, and you really enjoy that session, then I set you the most technically important session for us to do at this point in time, which results in you ultimately losing motivation and interest. I'm always willing to factor in any group sessions that people want to. Really, that could be a run session, swim session, cycle session, and this has to be sort of within reason. This time of year where it's really unmotivating, shall we say, to head outside and do sort of rides, then if somebody wants to head out and do a group ride, then I say, you know what, every other week, why not? Because we're a long way away from race season. And if you want to head out and you want to have a little bit of a smash fest with your friends, stop off at a cafe, race each other at the hills, try to stay warm, then you know what? I'd be a little bit of a Scrooge if I said no to that. But every other week, let's do a sort of a higher quality session indoors on the turbo trainer. And that's just, it's a bit of a compromise, Whereas when it comes to race season, then we have to look at that a bit differently and go, okay, well, realistically, if you are training for an Ironman or a 70.3, how much is that group session really going to help you relative to doing 4 hours in the aero position in steady state at race power? You do have to weigh that up, and that does have to change over the year. But if athletes say, oh, I want to include this race, or I want to do this challenge that I've found, or something like that, then at the very least it's going to be a conversation. It's very rare that I say to someone, no, don't do that. It may be that we have a chat, we decide actually that's not in our best interests. An athlete of mine, he was preparing for a race back in September, and he booked in a gravel ride the weekend before, and I said to him, look, there's nothing wrong with us doing that as long as you go into it, making sure that you take it a bit easy. Because I thought it would be a really good warm-up for the race. And so chances are the fatigue that would generate would actually still be with you on race day. So we had a bit of a chat, and he decided that even though, he really wanted to do it, for him it was more important to do well at his A race of the 70.3 the weekend after, so he can that gravel ride. But if it was any sort of 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before, again, probably not much of a problem. I tend to see my role as a coach as being much more of okay, so an athlete tells me what it is that they want to do, and I help them find the optimal way to get there within the parameters that they have set me. Rather than being, okay, well, if you want to complete this event, this is how we need to train. Okay, because there has to be compromise. You've got to meet the athlete where they are. And if you or a friend of yours has had a coaching relationship where it feels that they've had no autonomy and they've hated to train and the coach hasn't listened to them, then yeah, that's probably not a very good coach. So how do you spot what's actually a good triathlon coach as opposed to somebody who's just going to take your money? And provide something that might just be a copy and paste plan for you, Well, first thing I'd sort of look for is somebody who is, like I say, sort of willing to compromise, willing to adapt things to you, rather than, oh well, this is my plan, this is how we do it. Of course, a coach's philosophy is important, like understanding the general beliefs that they adhere to, but you also want somebody who's going to understand what it is that you respond well to, what it is that you enjoy, what it is that motivates you. And that all has to sort of come into it. So somebody who's actually interested in who you are as a person, and spends more time listening to you than telling you the best way to do things. Now, it may be a case that you're bouncing ideas off of each other on on a call, or in a meeting, any other scenario, but it shouldn't feel like a lecture. If you chat to a coach and they start giving you all of this information about this and how we do this and the right way and the wrong way of doing things. I do think that somebody who has a very clear idea of the right way, and I coach people the right way, I think that's a bit of a red flag personally. And to be cautious of hiring somebody based purely off of their own athletic achievements. Again, because different people respond to different things. I have athletes who respond much better to threshold work than they do from VO2 max sessions. Now, sort of broad science says that VO2 max is the best way to improve your performance, but these athletes, they're at the point during their training where actually we need to focus on a bit more threshold, and to be open-minded to that, to really listen to athletes and respond to what it is that they have to say. I would also say that you want a coach really who's going to be the full package. Somebody who can help you not only with your swimming, your cycling and your running, but also your nutrition and your strength training. And when I say the full package, I really do mean the full package. When coaches start out, they may, nutrition, well, make sure that you have a couple of gels an hour, or maybe some energy bars, and that will get you through. You may need to make sure that you eat enough. And if you were to ask them about, strength and conditioning, they might give you a few sort of leg exercises and hope for the best. And I guess that when I first started out coaching, this was sort of kind of my approach really. I think as a bit of a smokescreen, when people ask me tricky questions about nutrition, I kind of deflected it with, I don't really like to go into detail about those kind of things. And part of it was because I didn't want to go into depth about tracking macronutrients and calories and things like that, because I know that it's a very dangerous subject to start talking about if you're not qualified. You don't understand what it is, all of the sort of the considerations, the risks of kind of eating disorders and that can come from having that conversation in a ham-handed way. But since I have become sort of a certified nutrition coach, I really do sort of get into my stride and I'm talking to people, about this. And when I'm having a chat with potential clients on the phone and we start talking in depth about these areas, about nutrition and strength, I think that's when they start to really feel reassured. And they go, yeah, you know what? Like this guy, he has the answers. He's not just somebody who raced really well back in the day and is now going to give all of his athletes the same training program that he followed when he was training. It is much more somebody who is here to really to oversee all of my training. And I do honestly see the role of myself as a triathlon coach as being a bit of a project manager. I'd like to think that I'm a very good swimming coach, cycling coach, running coach, nutrition coach, and strength coach. But I'm never going to be excellent at all 5 of those, and the soft skills, the human side to coaching. I'm not a physiotherapist. I'm not a registered dietitian either. And sort of knowing that whilst, I'm here to provide people with my very wide base of knowledge, what I am not here to do is to sort of pretend to be everything to everyone. And I'm here to to refer people out as and when needs be. and say, look, I think realistically at this point we need to, we need you to get a video analysis with another coach. We need to get you talking to sort of a nutritionist, a physio, and if I can then engage in a dialogue with that person to be able to understand their needs and what is it they're after, that's how the magic happens. That's how we can really help them sort of achieve their goals, by utilising everyone around us in a network. Now, it's not that often that I will refer someone out to someone else, because most people's questions, generally speaking, have the answer to. But if somebody they find they have a medical condition, or they find themselves in an especially difficult place, or they're an especially high performance athlete, there does come a point where we need to go, okay, look, we're getting towards the upper limit of my knowledge here. I think we really need to get somebody else to look at this. Going off a bit of a tangent there. But, the beauty of online triathlon coaching is that you can find a coach who really resonates with you, who is going to be the best person to help you. I try my best to help people, but there's some out there who I just don't resonate with, who we just don't have that connection, and who I'm not in the best place to help them. And as a result, I don't have a minimum commitment for most of my plans. Because if we don't get on, I want both of us to be able to shake hands and go separate ways like adults, and I wish them all the best with the rest of their training, rather than sort of sticking them into, it's a minimum 6-month commitment and a 3 months up front, and the next 3 months is due in a month. I think that's a little bit questionable if you're looking into that, because the world of online triathlon coaching is very unregulated. There are definitely pirates out there, whether it's people who are simply overcharging you for what it is that they provide, or it is people who are sort of just giving everybody the same copy and paste plan. Honestly, I don't want you to let, a few bad experiences, a few sort of bad apples, as it were, sort of ruin somebody's idea of, what this really is and how it can help people get faster. Because just about every single person who hires a coach will get faster. The only people who don't tend to get faster after hiring a coach are those who don't listen to the coach. Something else to note, actually, as sort of getting towards the end of this episode, is that, broadly speaking, and this is very broadly speaking, a lot of online triathlon coaches are more qualified and more experienced than in-person coaches. In-person coaching is where a lot of people will cut their teeth, because it's an awful lot easier to sit on poolside and tell somebody, lift your elbow up in the water. Or you're not exhaling the water, make sure you're blowing out of your mouth and or your nose in the water. And to give these little cues, a lot of experienced swimmers would be able to provide that. And when somebody starts out on the coach education journey, they are always going to start out, as long as they're going through a national governing body, going to start out with group coaching. And then over the years, because there's often you need to be, with British Triathlon, you need to be at least a level 2 coach before you can even start to think about getting onto the qualifications that would allow you to coach on a one-to-one basis. You need to cut your teeth, you need to build up your experience in that sort of that club, group and one-to-one coaching space, before you can move on to online triathlon coaching, because the creation of a program, all of the soft skills that are required with it, that is a lot more difficult than simply giving people sort of basic feedback or cheering them on, clapping them as they run around a track, all of that. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. These coaches are really important within the sort of the grand ecosystem of triathlon as a sport. But at the end of the day, being able to write somebody a well-balanced plan to be able to provide them feedback, analyse the data, ask the right questions, really build something around that athlete as an individual, that's not easy. That is where you need a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, understanding, everything that goes into sort of creating something that's as kind of finely tuned as an online triathlon coaching program. It does take time, it does take experience, and chances are that if you went to the pool and you finish a swim session and you ask the coach, oh, what do you recommend as being good sources of protein for after swimming? Chances are they'd just sort of look at you blankly, or they might try and sort of babble their way through something about recovery shakes or protein sources without touching on the fact that, well, actually maybe we need to have carbohydrate in our post-workout recovery as well to replenish the glycogen stores. And in that case, that sugar isn't actually a terrible choice. And there's so many different layers to triathlon performance, and simply be able to analyse somebody's stroke. And there are some people out there who are, as I said earlier, who are better swim coaches than I'll ever be, and they don't know anything about nutrition because they don't need to know about nutrition because they are specialists. But if you are looking to hire someone to help you with your overall performance, then you should be looking at somebody who's more of an all-rounder rather than somebody who is sort of very hyper-focused on one discipline. It's useful to go to them for one-off sessions, but if you're looking for somebody to support you with your whole journey, looking for remote coaching is the way to go, and a coach who is suitably qualified and experienced. So let's wrap it up then. Let's bring ourselves to a conclusion. So, who is in-person triathlon coaching best for? Well, in-person triathlon coaching is best for newer athletes who are looking for help with their technique and with their form. Now, if you want to attend a group coaching session, there may be a minimum standard. They can't teach you to swim. You may need to go somewhere else to get adult swimming lessons. But if you're looking for coaching to improve your swim stroke as a triathlete, there will be various clubs and groups that you can swim with. And as a newer athlete, either swimming with a group or getting a one-to-one swim analysis can be some of the best money that you can spend. Okay, it can be incredibly helpful to have somebody be able to look at your stroke, show you what it is that you're actually doing, and help you improve. It's also great for the camaraderie if you attend group sessions or clubs. If you're training with other people, that can be really motivating. It can be really social. And if you are somebody who feels a little isolated in life, as I did at times when I was in London, then having that community of a club nearby and going to training sessions is a fantastic way to get fit, improve your performance while sort of staying social. But the fact is that these sessions are going to be generic. They aren't going to follow any grand periodization. They're not going to help you prepare for your event in question. A lot of triathlon clubs around the UK at least tend to be heavily focused on the sprint and Olympic distance. Very, very few athletes who are phenomenal Ironman sort of competitors you will see at a club session with any great regularity, except maybe a swim. Now, it's also worth pointing out that the schedules and the sessions at clubs are not designed for peak performance. Now, if I look at the club that I was in previously, on Monday we had a swim session that I coached. Tuesday was running speed sessions. Wednesday was cycling. And that was sessions that were outdoors. Actually, I coached outdoor session, which is quite unusual. Thursday was running, was hills. Friday there was nothing. Saturday was running track workout, and Sunday was long run. Now, if you were to go to all of those sessions, you'd be doing... Oh, and they also had organised rides on the Saturday and the Sunday as well, cycle rides. If you were to go to all of those sessions in a week, you would not be achieving peak performance because there would be far too much intensity in there, and there's a good chance that the sessions that you would be doing wouldn't actually be helping you improve. A lot of people sort of went to the club and they messaged me sort of as a coach and said, look, I really enjoyed this and improved a lot when I started, but I've hit a plateau. And so, yeah, because, you're not actually... If you are just going to club sessions to train, then you're not actually really going to be changing the stimulus much week on week. Okay, you may be doing a slightly different version of hill training, or you might be running 300s rather than 200s at the track, but it's that there comes a point where you have to look at optimization. And yes, sometimes optimization can include those club sessions, but just going along to purely club sessions for the most part and expecting to improve exponentially, it's not a realistic expectation. Now, online triathlon coaching is great for those who don't have any coaches near them, or just anyone who wants to improve, especially those who have unusual working habits, those who prefer to train alone, for the most part at least, those who are interested in performance. If somebody really wants to qualify to represent their country at an event, then hiring an online triathlon coach who can oversee all areas of their training as well as referring out when needs be is the best way to do that. Ideally someone who you can have good communication with, who understands you, who you trust, and they trust you, so you can have that fantastic bond that sort of grows over the months and the years, that really allows you to unlock performance. Somebody who's there, with suggestions, somebody who's an autocrat, somebody who will chat through different approaches that you could take and will help implement those with you. I'd say that, everybody, as long as they engage with the coach and listen to them and don't just think that by hiring a coach they'll go faster, everyone could improve to an extent by working with an online triathlon coach, and this can work in hybrid with club sessions, because if you can send somebody all the sessions that your local triathlon club, running club has, and they can then include those in the schedule, that's a great way to have the best of both worlds. So I hope that has answered your questions and you now feel a bit more informed. There are very few people I feel that I wouldn't be able to make faster, as long as sort of they trust me and as long as, willing to work with me to achieve those goals. If you're interested, have a look down in the show notes. You'll find my email down there. Drop me an email, you can have a click around some of the other bits down in the show notes, learn a bit more about me, what it is that I offer, and would see, whether you fancy working with me or maybe, another coach to really take your training and racing to another level in 2026 and to really, save you a lot of time, a lot of guesswork, and focus on, what it is that we all love, the training and racing. Good luck with your training this week. Stay safe. I'll see you next Tuesday morning.